GreedFall 2.
Adam,
Excited?
are you excited for this game?
I have some thoughts on it. I will say there's some
Adam's not
things.
excited.
No, hold on, Dave. You didn't let me get into it a little bit. I really like the setting of this game. I really like I just thought it looks really neat. And I was trying to do my research. I didn't play the first one. Obviously, it's not my typical type of game. But from what I've read and the things I've seen, is it going to be completely different or different in a lot of ways?
I don't think it's going to be different in a lot of ways, but I do think it's going to be a different experience from the first one. I'm glad you brought this up. So, just a quick recap on the first one, if you guys have never played it, because this game actually, the first one did come out quite a while ago. I mean, there's been a little bit of a gap here. I know games are typically in development for a couple years, but this has been a little bit of a gap to the point where like I was kind of assuming that we wouldn't see a Greedfall 2 just because that much time has passed. But in the first game, you play your character. Where you're kind of residing is like they're going. It's kind of like this like early civilization style game. And your character is kind of dealing with what is known as the Malichor plague, and this plague is kind of spreading all throughout, right? And the main kind of goal of the game here is that you are going to be traveling to a new island, which is Teer Fradee. And the goal of traveling to this new island is to try to figure out a cure for the plague, And it's kind of like the best way that I can kind of relate to it is kind of like a coming to America story, like a Christopher Columbus type thing, where you're going to this new world and kind of exploring and everything like that. And it was a really cool game. And then once you get to the island, you're kind of dealing with the natives that are there, and you're also dealing with these really large beasts, which was really cool. That's how they introduced like those big style boss fights into the game that I'm a huge fan of. And those beasts and the natives are kind of like seen as guardians of the land, right? And your whole goal here is to, fight your way through that, fight your way through the politics, find a cure for this Malichor plague. And it was a really good game. I thought it was a really good game. I'm not going to spoil it, but it has a ton of good lore. It has a great storyline. It's got multiple endings, and it was really good. I thought it was a really good game. And now, fast forward to Greedfall 2, if you want to pull up the trailer, we
It's
can kind
almost
of
like a rewind, though. So it's a sequel, but it takes place 3 years before the events of the first one.
it's a sequel, but it's almost like a prequel, and like it, but it's not. It's like the story starts before the story of
Hmm.
Greedfall, but it kind of plays out throughout the entire
Gotcha.
story of Greedfall, so it's taking
Hmm.
place at the same time. But the big twist here is, guys, if you're just listening, what we're looking at right now, that's absolutely brutal.
Yeah, chopped off his arm.
Yeah, we just saw somebody's arm get chopped off. But what you're looking at right now is you're seeing what I believe is going to be the main character for
Hmm.
this game. And the big kind of flip here is instead of this time being a settler that's coming to the land, you're
Hmm.
actually playing as a native who is already living on this land, watching all of these settlers come from a different area and
Hmm.
seeing like how this interacts with your life. And it's pretty cool because you get to see the flip side of the story. And
Hmm.
especially if you were a Greedfall 1 player, it's kind of cool to see this story from an opposite side, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
Definitely.
I think it's cool that they're kind of like working in the same timeline, but giving you like the other side of the story.
Hmm.
And right now, like I think this is one of the most intriguing things to me is like we're seeing this really badass action sequence. Like your character is like handcuffed right now, and she breaks free and is just like causing absolute mayhem for all these settlers. And I think it looks really, really interesting. And then
Yeah.
this is the part that really gets me. We're looking at four characters, and this like gigantic beast just crawls out of the ground, and I was probably sold at that, right?
Yep. Yep. That's all. That's all Dave needs is one epic boss in this game, and he's like, "Yep, I'm in."
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, like, so that the scene and the cinematics of this seems really cool. Um, and I know there's a lot that there's not a bunch on the gameplay yet, aside from a couple things that the producers like talked about. Essentially. She says that it's going to be a much more ambitious than the first game. And I have a question about that because I know from things I've read and watched, the gameplay of the first one wasn't all that great. Like it was more sold the game was more sold on the fact of the lore was so good and the cinematics were so good, not so much the gameplay. Do you think that with what she's saying, they're gonna do it more right in terms of the gameplay this time, or do you think that it's still gonna be sold based off of the lore?
So I think the lore is going to put a heavy hand here. I still think it's going to be a story driven game and people are going to love it for the story. But they did really take into account all of the comments from players of the first game. Like you said, the combat was a little lackluster, and I'll agree with it. It really was. And I just want to throw out here, I know people are calling this a Souls like, but I don't know, dude. Like I play a lot of Souls like games. I wouldn't classify it as a Souls-like. It felt like more of a hack and slash to me.
I was gonna say, like, I didn't think even like the first GreedFall, like I was watching the gameplay of it, I didn't have the true sense of like, oh, this is another Souls like that Dave wants me to check out. Like I didn't have that feel. It's got those like some similar mechanics, but the way it played a lot different than what I'm used to seeing in like games like Bloodborne and things like you show me all the time. And so I didn't think it looked like a and I think that's partially why I'm a little bit more interested. I'm like, okay, maybe that's why I'm a little bit more intrigued. And I also think going on the fact that they're calling it more ambitious, the fact that they're going to do an early access, I think is going to really help them too. With this game, which is coming out this summer, and so that's going to help them get even more feedback of the game and what they can do to improve it instead of just releasing it and going from there. So
Yeah, and, they do kind of say that, they're focusing a lot more on tactical combat, and when they say something like that, it gives me a lot of hope for the gameplay because like we talked about, honestly, I don't wanna be a broken record, but I'm not really sure why people call this a Souls-like. I mean, I've seen this referred to as a Souls-like a lot, and it's really not that. It really is more of a hack and slash, and the thing about the first Greedfall was it was one of those games that, like, the challenge of it never really kind of escalated at all. Like, I got to a certain point in Greedfall where it's like, if you had your setup the way that you wanted it and you got very comfortable with the combat, it was like a legit, just like pretty easy button masher. Like I didn't struggle with anything, you know what I mean? And it's not like I was like being very mindful of my move set. I mean, I was literally just kind of like running through endgame, just spamming the crap out of buttons and just mutilating people, which like it was fun. It was fun for a little while, but I mean, towards the end there, you're kind of like, all right, is this going to get any harder? Because I feel like I'm just murking everybody. Yeah. So I mean, a more tactical combat is great. I think that's great. I think it's going to do wonders for the game because people, like we said, people do call it a Souls like, and people expecting a Souls like experience want a challenging game, and it didn't deliver on that, but. I have hopes for the combat system, and a lot like you said with the early access. It's actually more of a big deal than it is probably commonplace because and I know a lot of people are saying like, why is there early access for a single player story game? But for this game specifically, it kind of makes sense. So this game is being developed by Spiders, and if you know anything about Spiders, their games are good from a lore standpoint. They always seem to tell a great story, but they are kind of known in the industry for this janky, not great gameplay. So I think the early access is really, really good because it shows that they're gonna take the time to get feedback from the community, and make the gameplay as good as it can possibly be, which is great news.
the one thing that I kind of found I don't want to say annoying, but kind of disappointing in the early access is the saves won't be compatible between the updates. And I find that really frustrating, especially like I don't know how far you'll get to go in the early access, but let's say you get like a quarter of the way, like it's going to be a quarter of the way in the story. And then every time they update, you have to restart. Like that's kind of frustrating to me. I wish they wouldn't do it like that.
I think I have an idea of exactly why they're doing that. So, typically when developers do this like early access type of thing, right? I feel like they already kind of have an idea of what's wrong with the game, right? And they kind of just want to confirm their suspicions in an early access. The thing with spiders is we talked about it is they're kind we talked about it, they're kind of known for janky gameplay and they might not really know exactly what the issues are. And I think what they want you to do is play a specific section of the game, give your feedback. They're going to fix that specific section of the game, and then they want you to replay it to make sure that it's fixed.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
They want that like assurance that you're going to replay it after they fix it and then give them the feedback of like, okay, it's good now. You know what I mean? Whereas most developers don't really need that.
Because I'm guessing is Spiders a more like a smaller developer? I don't want to say small. Is it more not a triple A developer? Are they like
No, no, no. Yeah, it's not a triple A developer. In fact, they're usually kind of known for these like one-off games, but GreedFall was their most successful title of all time, which makes sense of why they're making a sequel. Because yeah, they usually don't do sequels. They usually just do one-offs.
so? I guess that just means like they don't have the number of playtesters that a big developer would have, and so I mean I guess that makes sense. There was one other thing I was going to say about it. Just kind of going to the gameplay a little bit. I know you said they're probably not going to change much except for putting more focus on the tactical combat. Um, was the first one? Did you have a lot to do with like focusing on player choices and stuff like that? Is that new to the game, or is that going to be like continuation?
That's a continuation, and that's one of the things that I actually really liked about the original game, and I'm glad that they're bringing it over. It's one of those games where the choices that you make really do matter. They really, really, really do matter. And so much so that there's multiple endings to the first game. I forget exactly how many, but I think I'm based on what you do in the game. I think there's 4 endings to the game based on what you do. There's definitely two, and I don't want to spoil it because you have a very major choice to make at the end of the game. But I do believe there's 4 endings based on what you do in the game.
Okay, that's pretty cool because I know like I always say like oh those are so hard because to make those, but that's cool because it just makes the game more replayable. And if you want to see all those different endings and stuff like that, um, and I guess so it's a completely different world now too. Is that what, or like a different part of the map that they're gonna be?
No, so you're gonna go back to Teer Fradee. It's gonna be exactly like the first game, but it's gonna be the flip side. So you're seeing it now from the native perspective, which I think is really really cool because if you're a fan of the first game, you kind of want to revisit that stuff. Like it's been so long since you've been to that world that it's like it's almost at the point now where it'll be like kind of nostalgic to go through and like see those same places, but see them from a different side.
Was the first one open world too, or is this more? Or are they open world? Or are they kind of similar to the fact of like open concept again?
It's an open concept. It's still a linear experience, but I'm glad that you brought that up because the notes that I have about Greedfall 2 is that the game will be non-linear. So I'm not really sure what exactly that means.
Pick different. I don't know.
It's weird, right? Yeah, because if it was an open world, they would just say it's an open world.
Yeah, I would think that they would just say open world title action adventure game. That is strange. Maybe it's going to be kind of like Dark Souls in the sense that you can like do different things at different times, but not truly open world.
I wonder if they mean story like non-linear, like you don't need to play the original game to have this one make sense. Like you're gonna see the story from the other side, but like the characters in the first game, that whole storyline, it's not like you're gonna need to know that storyline or need to know what happened in that storyline for this game to make sense.
And I think that's where I was going to go with. That's another question I was going to ask. I was like, do you think you have to play the first one? But just based off of what we're kind of talking about, I don't know if you'll have to. And the fact that they call it a sequel prequel, like I don't think you're going to have to play the first one.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna have to play the first one. And just kind of last thing I want to touch on here. I think it's really cool that like if you look at the end of the trailer before that big boss fight comes up, you can see that your main character is walking with 3 other characters next to them. Okay, so in this game, they're saying that you are going to have three companions with you, which was not a thing in the first game. And I think that's a really interesting kind of way to do this because your companions, not only are your companions going to be like adaptive NPCs that like things can happen amongst your companions where they either do certain things or they can even like take off on you if you start making the wrong choices that they don't like and stuff like that. So I think it really kind of aids to the experience. But they're also saying that you can like control them in the fight. So I almost it's almost giving me like vibes of like Guardians of the Galaxy. You know what I mean? Where you can like kind of control them in the fight and have them do certain things, which I think it's really interesting. I think it's a very interesting dynamic to just add to the game because it wasn't in the first game at all.
That's really cool because I did actually like that in Guardians of the Galaxy. That was a fun mechanic that you could like have different characters do different things. So that's really neat. I think you I don't know, like you didn't sell me on this game because it's like a Souls like. I just think it sold me just a base of what this game is, and it does seem really cool, and I'm excited for this one to come out. And I think fans of the original are gonna really love this one, like just as much or even more than the first one, just based off how much effort it seems like they're putting into this new game to really focus on the core mechanics of the gameplay, the lore. I think it's gonna become a more well-rounded or full circle game.
You know, like we said, that they really focus on storyline and lore. So if you're one of those gamers that really enjoys the storyline and you know having a great amount of lore in the game, that's it's definitely a game that you should check out. And the one complaint on it was really kind of the combat system, and it feels like they're hashing that out. So yeah, I'm excited for it. I did enjoy the first GreedFall, even though it was a little janky and a little easy. So to see that they are, you know, focusing more on the combat system, making it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more fluid, always good things for me.
And then to kind of finish off the thought of how many endings the first one had, it was five.
Five. Okay.
Five.
Yeah.
Quick
Five.
Google search.
Five.
So I don't know if that's true. It's just what I quick Googled, and that is off of thegamer.com. So
Sounds
five.
about right. No, no,
Yeah.
I thought there was four. So maybe there's a hidden ending that I don't know about that I'll
Ooh,
have
Dave's
to
just
go
gonna go
back
back. Yeah.
and get.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Or maybe
Yeah.
I'll play it just one time and try to get that fifth ending so you don't have to go back.
I would appreciate that very much.
Yeah.